particularly as the national anthem was sung to him. And I guess that just enforces, doesn't it, the role that he now has. You know, it's a real sense with all of that we have to move on, but we now have to allow this family to grieve in their own way.
Stephen, we'll speak to you more before the end of the programme, but for now, thank you very much. Now, that funeral service, what an incredible service. Stephen mentions their pride. I don't know about you, but I do feel immensely proud to be British today. Do you agree with that? This event, of course, has been years and years in the planning. Do you think it met up to the expectations? Because the eyes of the world, I have to say, were on us. I certainly do. Marcus, over to you first. I mean, religion has played a huge part in proceedings today, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. The service, well, it made you proud to be English, made you proud to be British, it made me proud to be an Anglican. It was a service that was planned so carefully by Her late Majesty the Queen. It reflected her faith. It reflected the way that she saw life and death. And actually in the music and in the readings, everything was very carefully chosen to tell us a bit about her and what she loved and the faith that she so deeply treasured, and also what she hoped for in life everlasting.
Yeah, and Paul, your reflections on today?
Today was confirmation, if we needed it, that Britain does pageantry, pomp, ceremony better than any other nation on earth, and we shouldn't be embarrassed by this. And it also is going to attract, I believe, the biggest television audience in history. Some estimates say half of the world's population. We're looking at it, and it's the biggest collection of world leaders, well, you know, in living memory, if not in history, and twice that attended Nelson Mandela's funeral. I mean, I'm an agnostic, but you can't help but be moved by that ceremony, by the music, and by the Queen's own faith and beliefs. You don't have to believe yourself to admire her devotion to duty, the role she played. And I thought, although I was deeply moved by the Westminster Cathedral service, I was more moved by that at the St George's Chapel, especially when the new king, King Charles III, couldn't resist, you know, couldn't fight back the tears, especially as the national anthem was played. And I thought that was because he knows that he's becoming monarch, succeeding his mother, and hugely admired, and he's doing so at a very difficult time in our history with political divisions, economic crises looming, so it's not going to be an easy succession. He's a man who has strong beliefs socially, and there are those who know him. Some think that he will follow his mother in being an uncontroversial monarch. Others feel that he won't be able to resist making his views clear on things like climate change, the planet, the ecology, etc. And it'd be interesting to see how he handles that. But it's going to be a challenging time for him. But he's a man who has trained for this for a very long time, and he certainly, I think, will, in a sense, mourning his mother, will relish the challenge, but it's going to not be an easy challenge for him.
No, it certainly won't. Marcus, you know, we mentioned there about the sense of community. I think even people who perhaps previously wouldn't have described themselves as, I don't know, like full-on royalist or anything, you can't help but be moved by the events, the ceremonies that have taken place over the last few days.
Absolutely. I think this really came out in the queue, when you could see hundreds of thousands of people. I think they think 750,000 people were able to go through the lying-in state. And these were people who came from all walks of life, of all faiths, of no faith, of all sorts of political beliefs. I think a poll of the people in the queue in one of the early days said 60% of the people there were Remainers. So there's no particular Leave, Remain, political or otherwise division, and yet people wanted to find a way to express emotions, feelings, sentiments that go so much deeper, perhaps bubble down beneath the rational mind, need a way of being expressed that can't be expressed in the balance sheet or the ballot box. And they found ways to do it in all sorts of different ways, new ways and old ways, putting on armbands or holding up your mobile phone as the cortege passed.
Yeah, and you say mobile phones, by the way, but one of the things that I found really wonderful, actually, was when the Queen was lying in state, you saw everybody filing through, and for once, not a single mobile telephone. I know that was the rules, but to me, it just added a sense of, I don't know, it was wonderful to see people looking at something just with their eyes, remembering it just in their mind, as without this sea of mobile telephone screens blocking your view, and it was wonderful.
There was something else I noticed when the royal family members, the children and the grandchildren of the monarch, were going through there. When they were there doing their vigil, the reaction of people was quite strange. Some people almost looked like they were embarrassed because they felt that they shouldn't be staring at the coffin when the royals were standing there doing their vigil. And some people, obviously fascinated, some people actually put their eyes away because they felt they were intruding on private grief in a strange way.
Well, there's that funny interplay, isn't there, right now, between public grief and private grief.
Yeah.
We're watching a family go through private grief. We're watching them have to do it in the full glare of the cameras. And of course, King Charles is scarred by the memory of when the family held back from sharing their private grief with the nation when Princess Diana died. And this time they've done the opposite, and to very good effect.
Really.
It's been a brilliant PR exercise too throughout, not just apart from maybe a couple of blips around Prince Harry, but in terms of PR matters, it's been handled brilliantly, combining the pomp and ceremony of tradition with those populist walkabouts meeting the people. A great balancing act, that, and I think that's worked exceptionally well.
Yeah, and this is why I'm intrigued as well about your experience of today at home. Where did you watch the proceedings? What were your emotions when you watched it? I have to say, I've just been through such a roller coaster today, and I have actually just been in awe of what we've witnessed. It's just been incredibly, just beautiful. And I have to say, and I repeat this often, if you watch this show, I would never have described myself previously as a full-on royalist or anything like that. But I've been absolutely mesmerised, captivated. It's just history. In the making. I went over today to Hyde Park in London. I don't know if anyone else went there. This is my filming on the screen. I won't give up my day job, I've got to be honest. But I just found it spectacular. We touched on this earlier on, just how many people came together from all walks of life. There were, quite old people there. There were people like me that had taken their children there because, my son's only 2. He had no idea what was going on. But I wanted him to be there so that when he grows up, I can explain to him, this is where we went, this is what we did. Miraculously, he was silent for the 2-minute silence, which I was very pleased about. But it was just such an incredible atmosphere.
That river of people alongside the Thames queuing to get into Westminster Hall was quite remarkable. As a study, if you like, in inclusiveness, it was remarkable because you had there people of all ages, nationalities, ethnic groupings, and from all sorts of background, including non-believers, including non-royalists. But they were there for a variety of reasons. Some because they were devoted monarchists, some because, like me, they are what I would call lukewarm monarchists, but who prefer the idea of a monarchy to a superannuated political president, and others who were there because they just wanted to feel part of history, or they felt, you know, the comfort of the crowd. There were so many reasons why people were there.
There was another big one, if I may.
You may.
And that was her.
Yeah.
It was the late Queen.
Oh, indeed.
I thought it was fascinating when you look at the photographs of, or the footage of the lying in state, of the processions, and you've got the crown, and you've got the orb, and you've got the sceptre. And there you've got, I mean, as it says in, as they say in the coronation, the sceptre is the ensign of kingly power. You've got there the symbols of power and monarchy. But people can go and see those any day of the week in the Tower of London. They weren't queuing up to see the monarchy. They were there because of a spectacular woman.
The repeated thing that people said when the vox pops were being done, and the same questions were being asked sometimes, but too often perhaps, but people who response so often was, she's been there for me all my life.
Yeah.
And that was the recurring quote, but the most common one I can remember, apart from the military, who said she was my commander-in-chief,
Yeah, just
understandably.
an absolute constant through a world of continual change, hasn't it? And I think a lot of people perhaps took the Queen for granted.
That's true,
and then
yeah.
I think it's only, obviously now that she's no longer with us, that people actually go, wow, you take a step back, you reflect. And I think it was Princess Anne, when she accompanied her mum on the plane journey back into London from Edinburgh, and she did a statement, and she said as well in that statement that actually it's taken the Queen not to be here for people, many people, to reflect actually on what she meant and the fact she was just always there. I wonder, do you share that sentiment? Are you maybe perhaps somewhat in my camp, where you've been taken by surprise, actually, how you do feel, because I feel very connected to all of this, and it's taken me by surprise. Are you similar to me? Get in touch, let me know your thoughts. And you mentioned earlier, Paul, about how many people have watched and witnessed the events of today. It's estimated, get this, 4.1 billion people.
Which is half the world's population.
Yeah, it is. It's more than half the world's population has watched this, either streamed live or on their television. I mean, 4.1 billion people. To put that into context, by the way, the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, as I say, 4.1 billion. But Live Aid, many of us have seen that. That's been watched by 1.9 billion people. The wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, as she was, had 1 billion. And the 2012 Olympic ceremony, do you remember that? 900 million people watched that. So, I mean, you get a sense there of just how global this all is. It's not just us that's lost our Queen. It's not just the UK that is grieving. It is the world over. And in a moment, we'll talk to Sydney Zatt in Minnesota in the United States. But for now, let's cross to Sonia Singh, the editorial director at NDTV in India. Sonia, good evening. I believe you watched today's events.
Much the lead story. We led with this in our 8 o'clock news bulletin, and we were on it live for much of the day as well. I think really watching the funeral today, as the previous guest just said, I think we really saw the best of Great Britain, and that was extraordinarily moving for all of us who are not, of course, British, but in a sense felt we had a connection with the Queen. On a personal note, I had the honor of meeting Queen Elizabeth when she had come to New Delhi. I was a Chevening scholar and studied briefly in the United Kingdom. And the Queen was gracious enough to walk around, meet young students like me, ask us about how we liked living in England, what were the student accommodation facilities like. And she made each one of us feel extremely special. Now, I know that that is, in a sense, is her job. But she did it with such grace and dignity that she left indelible memories for me and everyone else who was there that evening. And I'm sure you've heard from across the world very similar incidents, and of course in Great Britain as well. So it was an interesting time to watch at a time when, in a sense, in India especially, we are redefining the complex legacy with which the colonial rule of Great Britain over India is being seen. Ironically, in a sense, that the day the Queen died is the day that the Prime Minister of India launched the Kartavya Path in New Delhi, which was earlier called the Imperial Kingsway, and said that we now have to end the colonial mindset. Yet today, our president is representing India at the Queen's funeral. There is a sense that a global figure, a leader who really commanded respect and admiration, who ruled Great Britain for 70 years, is no more. But for us, the future which lies ahead for the India-UK relationship is one which is positive, which is one which is of much more equality. As you know, recently, India overtook the United Kingdom as the 5th largest global economy. So I think it's also a time when we are looking at redefining our role in the Commonwealth, the need of it, where India actually stands. And I think in that sense, King Charles will have a task set out ahead of him, besides, of course, domestically at home in Great Britain. But keeping the international legacy his mother carried is something which will be, I think, changing in this changing world and the future.
Indeed. Also joining me tonight is Sydney Zatt. She's a reporter with Royal Central and ABC 6 News in Minnesota. Good evening to you. How has the reaction been over in the US?
It really has been quite a somber feeling. I was just thinking about this, and I'm 26 years old. I've lived through quite a lot of world events, and I've never seen anything like this. And I think a lot of people haven't. Just the pageantry and all that's gone into it. I think it really resonates with the world that we have lost somebody we have known all of our lives. And as many have said, we kind of thought she would always just be there. And I think many people are really starting to feel her loss, especially after seeing the images from the funeral and her lying in state the past couple of days.
Yeah, and how warmly do you think King Charles will be received and loved by Americans?
That's hard to say, because I think there is a lot of unanswered questions around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's interview they did with Oprah. Many are still wondering who said this, who said that. And I think Charles will still kind of stick to that traditional rule book that royals have stuck with all their lives. And I think that's also kind of the rule book that has caused some of these issues, because there's this idea of this is the way royal protocol works. And I think as we get into the later years of his reign and we see Prince William start to take more sovereign responsibilities, I think we'll start to see the monarchy modernize a bit. And I think Prince Charles will be that kind of in-between point for people. And I think Americans, they will accept him, but I think as many people across the world, they're still mourning the Queen, and I think it will be a hard transition for people.
Indeed. It's very evident, isn't it, that our Queen Elizabeth II was and is loved the world over. Ladies, thank you very much for your time this evening. And I do, Marcus, I think something about Queen Elizabeth II, she was just magical in the eyes of so many people, young and old, irrespective of the country where they live.
Yes, and I think, part of that is the majesty that hedges around a monarch. So crowns, orbs, sceptres, things like that give a certain glitter to a person. But she herself was so profoundly countercultural. I think that was something that really stood her out across the world. And actually, Justin Welby raised this a bit in his sermon today. She was somebody who put service first. Not ruling, leading, not instructing, commanding, but service. And you could see that from the fact she was still going 2 days before her death.
Yeah,
Right.
Looking remarkably well, I have to say. When I saw that picture, I thought she looked really, really well.
I agree. But you've also got to remember that she was the first woman really to of modern times to actually become such a prominent figure on the global stage. And that, I think, is that together with her longevity, it's what's made her so special in the eyes of millions many millions around the world and at home, even if they weren't monarchists.
Yeah, and we talk about this sense of duty, and that, for me personally, has really kind of hit home when we saw just how quickly Charles was expected to perform, because it's all well and good we sit here talking about we've lost our monarchy, we've lost a queen that we love. This was his mother, and you know, it was almost instantly he was right there. Well, not just him, the whole family, but immediately expected to perform, immediately thrust into the public eye, and you know, that, well, I can't imagine that, and I'm sure it's because, you know, I've not been bred in that way, and he will, of course, be aware of his duty, but still, these are human beings.
Tonight at 7:30, I think, is with the cameras for once not there, is when the royal family can shed their tears and fully emote, as it were, and I think they deserve that privacy this evening.
There's a curious element with this. We've been grieving as a people without needing to do any of the things that normally come with grief.
Yeah.
When your mother dies, when your wife dies, God help you if your child dies, you've got paperwork to fill in, a funeral to organise, probate to sort out, people to contact. We, as the people, haven't had that. All we've had to do, watch on television, go and queue up, stand lining the streets. But actually, we've been able to process grief far more quickly than the royal family have been able to do, who have been having to deal with the reality of the busyness that comes with a death.
Yeah, and I think as well, we touched on this earlier, but I do think that also that what's happened has brought memories of losses in people's families. I know that I've seen emails that people have written to me that have said, you know, I saw one lady wrote this last week, saying that she felt more upset at the Queen passing than she did when her own mother passed, because when her own mother passed, to your point, she was so distracted with all of the other things that she had to do, whereas this time, I think the sense I got from that viewer's email was that now she's kind of, that grief that she perhaps didn't process properly is now caught up with her, triggered by the events of the passing of our Queen.
I'm picking up your earlier point, Michelle, in fact, about her looking still alert when she said farewell to Boris Johnson and welcomed Liz Truss as Prime Minister. I think her family, as well as the public, didn't expect things to end that quickly. You know, 2 days later. I mean, obviously her devotion to duty was immense, and we all knew that she was frail and ill and probably wasn't going to live too long. But I think the suddenness of that shocked not just you and I and, you know, the entire population of the country, but also I think her own closest relatives.
But they wouldn't have been called up on a flight that afternoon.
Right, only Anne was in situ at the time.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's cross live, shall we, over to Buckingham Palace. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, is there now. Mark, I was in central London today and I was in awe at the logistics that must have had to be managed and thought through, because every inch of what I saw seemed to have taken place seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, there was real potential, of course, with so many people in central London for something to go wrong. But I've been speaking to Scotland Yard this evening. It seems that everything has gone without a hitch or anything of any significance anyway. So they will be breathing a huge sigh of relief, even though this event has been so long in the planning. It is just such a mammoth effort in terms of the resources that it requires here in central London. Barely a single police force in the whole of the country. There are 43 police forces in England and Wales alone. Barely a single one of those police forces were not involved in some way in sending officers to London to help out with this. Some 10,000 officers, we believe, on duty today for the funeral, which is the biggest single operation they have ever mounted, and it's unlikely that they'll ever mount as big an operation again. That's how, you know, fundamentally important today was to get right, and they did. But around about 9:15 this morning, we got the first indication, really, that lots of people had come as expected to the capital when the Mayor of London sent out a message to say that all public viewing areas were now full. and as I say, that was 9:15 this morning that message was coming out. So everybody crowded in. They saw, hopefully most of them, what they came to see, which was that funeral procession with Her Majesty's coffin on the gun carriage. The route from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey was clearly quite short, but the route that took them after the funeral service through Whitehall and across Horse Guards, down the Mall and up Constitution Hill to Wellington Arch, and then of course onto the State Hearse up to Windsor, gave opportunity then for many thousands of people to pay their respects, and it was an incredibly humbling sight when we saw the processions coming through here. We had those mounted police officers from Canada at the front with the Metropolitan Police officers, and then row after row of Air Force personnel, Army personnel, and also Royal Naval officers, but not just from this country, from all of the realms that the Queen was head of state of, and many of the Commonwealth countries as well. It gave an indication, Michelle, of just what a global sovereign the Queen was, not just the ruler of the United Kingdom, the head of state of this nation, but 14 other nations and head of the Commonwealth as well.
And just tell me briefly, Mark, what's the situation at Buckingham Palace now? Are there still people around, or have many people now gone back home? Well, everybody here, broadcasting-wise, is still here. In the US, of course, they'll be broadcasting for their evening shows, and all our colleagues from New Zealand and Australia, they'll be preparing in a few hours' time for their breakfast shows. So they're all still here, but the infrastructure is being taken down slowly but surely. We're seeing the lorries coming in to take away some of the estimated 500 portaloos that have been scattered around various areas of central London to help the public caught short. And there's still quite a lot of people coming down here actually behind us to Buckingham Palace. They're being funneled to one side of the Mall and heading down past the palace, not to the front of the palace, but to the side of the palace, heading down towards Birdcage Walk, that sort of area. But yes, still hundreds of people here. OK, I'll leave it at that for now. Mark White there, live from Buckingham Palace. Thank you very much. And yes, he mentions those portaloos. I can confirm that in Hyde Park, I marvelled at the arrangement of portaloos. And it's strange, the thing that you remember, because you have to consider these practicalities, don't you? And I'm very pleased to say that they did them all very, very well. Many of you were writing in, by the way, saying you just don't know how to thank enough all of the people that were responsible today for all those logistics. I completely agree with you, and I had a very nice chat with a couple of policemen this afternoon as well when I was trying to get back for this show, and I was asking them about the morale that they feel, because often the police, they get a bit of a kicking, don't they? And the two chaps that I spoke to was just telling me that how high their morale was, how proud they were to be part of this, and how much gratitude I think has been displayed by so many of the onlookers. I played a clip last week from the queue where so many people were kind of bursting into spontaneous applause whenever the police officers were walking by and the military people were walking by, and it was really, really wonderful. And I'm like a broken record, so I am, but I really hope that this kind of niceness, the togetherness, the gratitude, I hope that it continues. Do you think it will? Tell me. I've been asking for your thoughts as we've been going through the programme today, asking you to share with me what's today meant to you, where have you witnessed the events from. You can get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. One of my viewers, Elaine, has got in touch. She and her husband have taken this wonderful picture today. Look at it. She took took that picture from her position on the mall. She said they arrived there at 1 o'clock this morning to save our place. No messing around for you guys. She said that she shared the whole experience with a lovely group of people that they were sitting with. Many of us, she says, couldn't save God Save the Queen, as we were quite tearful singing it. She goes on to say that they will never forget this day. I hear you. Keith says, everything today represented what it means to be British. I was so proud of our armed forces and everybody who helped to make the Queen's final journey a momentous and dignified occasion. He says, it was special beyond words. Diane says, what a wonderfully moving day. So proud of my country and everybody who helped create such a marvellous commemoration to the Queen. She says her heart broke at the lone pipers at Westminster, but especially at Windsor. The fading away of the music was so symbolic of her departure, of loss and of the distance created in death, she says. It was so terribly poignant that she wept. I have to say, Diane, you are absolutely not alone there. Andrew says, I'm proud of our Queen, proud of our King, proud of our military, proud of our countrymen. We are a great nation with the monarchy at its heart. And Sean says, we've been watching all day via GB News because due to disabilities, they thought it'd be best not to try going to London, but to stay at home with our friends at GB News. Sean, it is an absolute pleasure to have you. And Marcus, this whole kind of sense of gratitude, that is the thing that's coming through on my email tonight. So many people just so grateful, whether it's just to the people that have helped organise the logistics, to the broader royal family, to the Queen, but gratitude is a sense that I'm hearing very loud tonight.
Yes, I think there are probably two strands to that. The first is it's probably a psychological outworking of the gratitude that so many people feel towards the Queen. And actually, she isn't here to receive the gratitude, but all the people who have made our gratitude collectively possible are. And I think that it's quite a common thing with grief to project emotions onto others, sometimes negatively, most common, that projection is commonly used, but also positively, and I think there's an element of that. I think there's another strand, which is we've got used to the idea that Britain can't run a... I'm trying to think of the correct way to phrase that.
Let's just say sometimes things don't go swimmingly.
Exactly.
Yes.
Sometimes things don't
go
what you mean. Swimmingly. That we've been through quite a torrid decade where an awful lot of things that we've hoped would happen haven't happened, plans haven't gone well, the civil servants have been viewed not to be able to come up with the goods, politicians have been seen as not being especially competent, and suddenly...
Or honest.
Or indeed honest. And suddenly we've had, in the last 10 days, this amazing logistical operation, this amazing coming together after how many different splits on how many different axes. It's actually been so heartening. It's really warmed the soul. And I think a lot of people are finding their national heart strangely warmed, to quote Wesley.
To me, it's been an amalgam of mourning with celebrating the Queen. It's not entirely... It's obviously there's deep sorrow there, but there is also admiration and celebration of the life she lived and the role she fulfilled. So everybody, which is why people applaud. You know, some people were crying, some people were clapping, and there's nothing wrong with either of those reactions. But
it's sometimes confusing knowing what is the right emotion to display, because when we went to the park today, we had it on the big screen, and at the end of the silence, of course, we then had the national anthem. And at the end of the national anthem, my little boy, obviously he was quite cheered, I think, by the noise, the music, the singing, and he burst into a round of applause. And I wasn't sure what to do. I don't know what to do. But nobody else clapped. And it was just kind of very solemn. And I thought, oh, well, you know, would clapping have been the wrong thing or the right thing? So sometimes people kind of jostle with how they feel versus how they think they ought to present their feelings.
When you had the hearse, going through, for example, Chiswick, people were clapping very loudly. So I don't think there's anything wrong with applauding. to honour the Queen, as well as feeling grief. It's a mixture of grief and gratitude and admiration, and I think applause is applicable in certain circumstances. And obviously you wouldn't do it in church, but I think on the street it was perfectly acceptable.
But also, of course,
go on.
She was 96. You know, one thing that differs from her father's death and from Princess Diana's death, both of whom died young,
True.
where the grief was tinged with tragedy. Actually, as it said in the funeral service today, we shouldn't grieve like them without hope. When we're dealing with the death of a 96-year-old, there is grief, there's loss, but there isn't the tragic element that happens with young deaths.
Yeah, good point.
Well, in Diana's case, of course, it was such a traumatic shock scenario, and of course, but I think the royal family, as a result of Diana, have learned a lot in terms of PR. And as I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with PR in these circumstances.
Yeah, and Debbie just sent a message saying, what about the pallbearers? Should Michelle, the young men carrying Her Majesty's coffin, need recognition too? What a great job, she says they did. Let me tell you some facts about this. They did a wonderful job. 8 pallbearers. The coffin was lead-lined and it weighed between 250 kilograms and 317 kilograms. So they did, I mean, they did a remarkable job. We were talking about it earlier on today, actually, just saying how proud you would be if that was one of your sons. You know, those young men will never forget that.
There was an extra difficulty for them that I heard about when speaking to one of the pallbearers for the Queen Mother's funeral. When they come out of the Abbey, they come from somewhere that's dark. And the minute they hit the light, it is dazzling, it's blinding.
Yeah,
and they're carrying one of the most precious burdens they've ever carried, and they're having to go down steps whilst effectively blind.
Yeah, by dazzled. I mean, we're just watching it on the screen now, and they I mean, can you imagine? I can't imagine how nervous I would feel, because, you know, we just described it. 4.1 billion people's eyeballs are on you. And you know that. I mean, that is your moment, isn't it? Look at those stars. I do not envy them, but as my viewer points out, they do deserve recognition, because what a remarkable job they did.
And no matter how many rehearsals you've actually had on the day itself, nerves must be immense.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how they chose who those 8 people would be.
They've got to be the same height.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise...
Yeah. Otherwise, yes, you have an undignified tilted coffin, which was the last thing you want.
Yeah, which is not what we want, of course. We've just been speaking as well, haven't we, about the queues to go and see Her Majesty when she was lying in state. Did you join those queues? Did you go? I think you did, didn't you?
No, I didn't join the queues.
Oh, no, right. But you saw the...
I was able to see through, on the television.
Ah, right. Well, the King and the Prince of Wales, they went out to the queue on Saturday, which I just thought was a wonderful thing to do, actually. The Prince of Wales later tweeted, I've got it on my screen now, saying it means an awful lot that you are all here. And I have to say, I think it probably meant an awful lot, actually, to those people that were in the queue, that the King and the new Prince of Wales had actually kind of gone out, basically, again, to say thank you.
Well, this was, as I said earlier, this is the valuable public relations counterbalance to all the pomp and ceremony.
Absolutely.
It is the populist touch, and I use the word populist not in any derogatory sense, but in a complimentary sense. And meeting the people, I think, was essential, and they did it with great dignity, great grace, and the people who were there and who shook their hands or whatever of the royal family, I think that will live with them forever. And a lot of those people, as I say, might not even have been ardent monarchists, but simply people who had great admiration for the Queen.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of you are writing in. And that sentiment is just coming through, proud to be British. So many of you saying proud to be British. Again, gratitude. coming out, same sentiments. So many of you, all of you pretty much, saying that you've been absolutely glued to watching the events of today and that you will never, ever forget them. Sharon says it was also lovely, Michelle, to see the Queen's pony being brought out to greet her. She retired. And I think the corgis were there as well, wasn't there?
Yes. Well, I also thought there was a moment there which went viral but has caused controversy, I don't know why, when a spider was spotted on King Charles's card on the coffin. Must confess, I missed it. My wife saw it and said, God, there's a spider. And I said, what are you talking about? You're hallucinating. Then suddenly it began to explode on social media and went viral. Some people have been saying that shouldn't even been reported. No newspaper, because newspapers were then picking it up on their websites. There is a moment of levity that is allowable on these occasions. I must confess, I then cracked a rather stupid joke when I said perhaps the spider recognised King Charles' famous or infamous black spider writing, but in fact,
I see what you did there.
But in fact, that was a moment of levity, and I don't find there's any harm in it. But my bad joke. But when that went viral on social media, and you had national newspaper websites reporting it, I don't think that matters. I think some people overreacted by saying this is outrageous. They shouldn't even be reporting this. I think that's ridiculous. Well,
you've just answered something for me, because Phil, one of my viewers, he's written in and said, Michelle, did you see the spider? And I've got to say, I had absolutely no idea.
Well, I'm meant to be a trained observer. My wife, who's also a journalist, saw it and said, I said, you are hallucinating. What's the spider?
Well, I thought Phil must have had one too many shandies as he's been watching the events unfold today. So I had to say, Phil, I had no idea what on earth you were talking about. But now I've had it explained. I still don't know what we're all talking about, but I'll go and look it up. I shall go and look up the spider. Did anyone else see that? So are you keen and attentive to the details? Again, keep your thoughts coming in. Just a whole sense of, it's so nice. My inbox tonight is so nice. I'm enjoying your interactions, your company tonight. Everyone just seems connected and unified, and it's just nice. And I wonder, will this continue? Because we're all connected right now, and I say, as a northerner in London, right now I'm finding it fascinating just how much everybody's speaking to each other. Because that's
smiling to each other.
Yeah.
Smiling at
it's the power of the crowd. It's the power of the shared experience.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe this is her last gift to the nation.
One of her final legacies, that perhaps we enter a new era of niceness.
I think it's very good for the royal family, but I think once the official mourning is over, we are back into some very tough, hard times in politics, and I'm sure privately King Charles recognises that and is only too aware of it.
And the official mourning period is kind of done, but
it's an extra week for the royal family. They have an extra week.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right.
But that doesn't stop Parliament. Parliament will be back. We'll have the new Chancellor's statement on Friday, and we'll finally find out a bit more about the so-called programme to help business as well as families cope with the energy bill crisis.
Yeah, indeed. Liz Truss has a huge inbox. Let me just cross back, though, live, if I may, back to Windsor. Stephen Dixon remains there. Good evening, Stephen. Tell us more about what's going to be happening next.
Well, it's interesting, Michelle, isn't it? Because we have had, you're talking about the national mourning period, which comes to a close, well, officially tomorrow morning, I think it is. But it's been this huge national outpouring, hasn't it, of grief, of respect, of sympathy, of love for Her Majesty the Queen, but also for the King as he moves forward into his new role. But what is happening tonight is that these very public events suddenly become extremely private. And we've had, of course, the lying in state. We've had the huge state funeral, the remarkable state funeral at 11 o'clock this morning, and then the service at 4 o'clock in St George's Chapel behind me. Small, about 800 guests or so, but still a more intimate event. But from here on in, it becomes absolutely personal. No cameras, no interaction, purely for those who knew the Queen. And that happens in St George's Chapel, again behind me, at 7:30, at which point the Queen will be finally laid to rest alongside her husband and other members of her family. And that is an intensely private moment, and I think surely we'd all agree, it's exactly what is needed now for this family who have had to live their grief very publicly, which must be immensely difficult. Now they have this private service and those very final moments where they can say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth, goodbye to their mother, their grandmother, their great-grandmother in the most private and dignified way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and that privacy element. You know, when you see people, you see the royal family out and about, a lot of people do seem to almost kind of feel entitled, you know, I want to touch you, I want to just put my phone in your face and take a selfie with you, as though they are objects, if you like, and they're not, they're human beings.
But interestingly, I think it only adds now to the challenge for King Charles and for Prince William as Prince of Wales. Because there's possibly a greater expectation now, if you like, of contact with the royal family, and I think that is something that they're going to have to consider. How to actually handle things from now on, will be interesting and challenging, because the royal family and how it handles its relationship with the population is an evolving thing. It's not a static, and we have to find a way where the great traditional thing that we can be so proud of, that the pomp and pageantry we do so well, is also balanced out by, if you like, the way the family relate directly to the people, and that's in a changing world of social media, etc. And this is going to be interesting. It can't just remain the same. The best parts have to remain the same, but other parts have to evolve and new ideas come in.
Yeah, and time will tell what, if any, actually, that evolution looks like. But Marcus, I think I cut you off. You was about to come in just before I went over to Windsor.
Ooh.
What do you remember? What you were going to say?
I can't remember what I was going to say. But one thing I would say about the services that we've seen today, and the one that we won't see, is how there is a very powerful stripping down of the late Queen to her essential dignity. And it's a bit like with the Holy Roman Emperors. When they died and they went to their burial place, their crypt, and when they arrive, there's a great big knock on the door, and who is there, says the monk behind the door, and they read out the full titles: the Emperor of the Austrians, King of the Hungarians, I do not know him, and the door slammed. And then they knock again. Who is there? Emperor Franz Joseph, just with the name. I do not know him. The door's closed. And then knocks the third time. Who is there? Franz Joseph, a child of God, a sinner. Bring him in. And there's the Queen in Westminster Abbey, 2,000 people, world leaders, everybody. Orb, sceptre, crown. Brought to Windsor. Much smaller gathering in the church where she worshipped regularly. Orb, sceptre, crown are removed. And she goes down into the crypt. Tonight, just 4 members of the family and the priest leading the service, and she's laid to rest with her father, her mother, and her sister.
And that privacy is just as it should be.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
As it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just, I mean, I would have liked, and I know it doesn't always happen like this, I would have liked the families who have had a little bit of time to kind of catch a breath, to process things before they had to face us, the public. But obviously that's not tradition, that's not the system, that's not the process.
Well, it's impossible when you inevitably have a system where the very second that a monarch dies, their heir succeeds. So, King Charles became king with his mother's last breath, and that is what an hereditary monarchy means.
Yeah, and Patricia on Twitter says, I am so proud to be British, she says. I'm just bursting with pride. No other country, she says, could do this the way we have. Queen Elizabeth has done so much for us, and she will be so sadly missed. One of my other viewers, Jeff, from Somerset, he is currently in Benidorm in Spain. He says that he has been watching the funeral on the big screen. And there is his picture. I've got to say, I'm sitting quite far away from my screen. I can't actually see the big screen on that. But it looks very good where you are from what I can see. I can see palm trees, I could see sunshine, well, I could do. And I could see, yeah, sunshine. Oh, but although actually the weather has been, for this time of year as well, it's been remarkable.
And thank God for the people in the queue.
And it didn't rain. It didn't rain as we mark the end of a great rain.
No, it didn't rain, and so many people actually camped out today. Well, not just today, I think over the last day or so, have camped out as well on the mall and in various different places. Lots of dedication. They wanted that front spot, didn't they? So thank goodness the rain stayed away. That's what I can say. John says, Michelle, what we have witnessed is thousands of years of history and continuity of our nation, with the passing of our Queen, surrounded by the historical buildings and the like. He says what we've seen today is the end of an era. Lynn says, everything today was successful, not because of coincidence, but because of the planning and rehearsal that went into it. I think you've made a very good point, Lynn, because what we saw today was the end of it all, actually, and it's easy to forget, perhaps, the years and years of planning and practice and systems and all the rest of it that will have gone on. I can imagine, though, tonight that there's quite a few people in this country breathing a big sigh of relief, raising a glass and celebrating the fact that the logistical role they had all went well. And before I do finish tonight, I've got some lovely emails in, I have to say. I'm feeling really grateful for you all for getting in touch tonight. But Mary, she's been in touch saying that she is an 89-year-old widow and has felt a little bit isolated tonight while everyone celebrated with her family and friends. But she's grateful, she says, to GBNews for keeping her company, saying that she doesn't feel like she has missed out on this historic day. To Mary and to all of you at home, thank you for your company. And I can tell you, it's been an honour and a privilege to share this with you. That is unfortunately all we've got time for this evening. Thank you very much to Reverend Marcus Walker and to Paul Connew. And again, thank you to you at home for your company. Have a
I'm here at Buckingham Palace at the end of this extraordinary, moving and very, very historic day. We're going to go through everything that has happened today with experts, analysts, but before